It all began on a Tuesday. A Tuesday so profoundly uninteresting, so vague in its very essence, that it felt like a personal insult from the universe. I was sitting in a meeting, a state of being I had come to accept as my professional purgatory, when Kevin from Aachen cleared his throat. Now, when Kevin clears his throat, it is not merely a biological function, it is a harbinger of doom, a sonic omen that a truly terrible idea is about to be born, fully formed and dripping with corporate jargon. He stood up, his posture radiating the unearned confidence of a man who lists synergy as a skill on his resume. "Team," he began, and we all instinctively braced ourselves. "I have had a revelation. What if, and please hear me out, we combine our two flagship products?" A silence fell over the room. Our two flagship products were, for context, artisanal mayonnaise and high-performance electric skateboards. They were as compatible as a fish and a bicycle. If the bicycle was on fire and the fish had a crippling fear of I waited for the laughter. I waited for someone, anyone, to gently guide Kevin back to his chair and offer him a glass of water and a long vacation. Instead, Brenda, our department head, leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a terrifying light I had only ever seen in documentaries about cult leaders. "Kevin," she whispered, her voice filled with a reverence usually reserved for religious epiphanies. "That is brilliant. And that, my friends, was the moment the abyss stared back. The idea, which should have been euthanized at birth, was not only alive, but it was thriving. It was coddled. It was given a name: Mailboard. The project was codenamed Operation Smooth Ride. I am not making this up. I wish I had the imagination to invent something this profoundly stupid. The first presentation was to the mid-level managers. Kevin clicked through a PowerPoint deck that was a masterpiece of nonsense. It was filled with graphs that went aggressively up and to the right. Stock photos of smiling millennials, inexplicably eating mayonnaise while riding skateboards, and buzzwords like disruptive, paradigm shifting, and experiential condiment mobility. I watched as a room full of people who were paid six figures nodded along sagely. Not a single person questioned why anyone would want their mode of transportation to also be a sandwich spread. Not one. Instead, Greg from finance asked, "Have we considered the gluten-free market for the board itself?" The idea, now bolstered by Greg's gluten-free anxieties, ascended to the next level. The senior executives. This was the big one. Surely, I thought, surely the grown-ups in the room, the ones with corner offices and salaries that could buy small islands, would see this for the unmitigated disaster it was. The presentation was even more elaborate this time. Kevin had commissioned a jingle. It was a jaunty ukulele tune with the lyrics, Mailboard, Mailboard, spread the fun all over town." I felt a piece of my soul wither and turn to dust. The chief financial officer, a man who looked like he had been chiseled from a block of granite and disappointment, stared blankly at the screen. He adjusted his glasses. "What is the projected return on investment for the condiment propulsion system?" he asked, completely deadpan. Kevin, without missing a beat, replied, "Our projections show a 17% increase in user engagement through what we are calling flavor-based navigation." He just invented that phrase on the spot. Flavor-based navigation. And they bought it. They did not just buy it. They gave him a standing ovation. The project was greenlit. A budget was approved. A budget so large you could have used it to solve world hunger, or at the very least buy every single person on Earth a jar of normal mayonnaise and a separate non-edible skateboard. We formed subcommittees. There was the viscosity team, tasked with ensuring the mayonnaise was thick enough for spreading, but thin enough for, and I quote, aerodynamic lubrication. There was the flavor integration unit, which experimented with adding bacon bits and sriracha swirls into the skateboard deck itself. There was even an ethics committee to debate whether it was morally acceptable to encourage people to ride on their lunch. Their conclusion, after a 3-day offsite retreat in Napa Valley, was yes, with appropriate safety disclaimers. The first prototype was a Lovecraftian horror. It was a skateboard that actively wept mayonnaise from tiny pores in the grip tape. It smelled, unsurprisingly, like a deli that had been left out in the sun. During the first test run, our intern, Chad, stepped onto the Mailboard. He immediately slipped, flew into the air in a perfect, menace-lubricated arc, and landed in a vat of experimental, pickle relish-flavored wheel bearings. He was fine, physically, emotionally. I do not think Chad will ever be fine again. He just sat there, covered in green goo, whispering. The flavor is the journey. Did this catastrophic failure stop the project? Of course not. It was merely a learning opportunity. The incident report described it as an unforeseen, kinetic, condiment displacement event. T's solution, obviously, was to double the budget and hire a culinary propulsion specialist from Arriba, company that had famously gone bankrupt trying to market soup-filled bicycle tires. Months passed, my will to leave dwindled with each new progress report. We had weekly smooth ride synergy sessions, where we would sit in a circle and share our feelings about mayonnaise. We had team-building exercises where we had to build bridges out of breadsticks and use mayonnaise as more. I began to see the world through a pale, creamy haze. Everything smelled faintly of eggs and vinegar. Finally, the launch day arrived. We were holding a massive press event in the city plaza. There was a stage, influencers who had been paid an obscene amount of money to pretend to be excited, and a giant, 50-foot-tall inflatable jar of mayonnaise. The grand finale was to be our chief executive officer, a man named Bob, riding the final production model of the Mayo board across the stage. This new model was the pinnacle of our collective insanity. It did not just leak mayonnaise, it had a pressurized system that could spray a jet of mayonnaise up to 15 feet for emergency braking. This feature was called a spicy stop. Bob, a man whose only physical activity was walking from his desk to the chauffeured car, got on the board. He wobbled, he smiled weakly for the cameras, and then he accidentally hit the spicy stop button. A torrent of garlic aioli erupted from the front of the board, hitting the lead violinist of the string quartet we had hired for ambiance directly in the face. Startled, Bob lost his balance. The board shot out from under him, skittering across the stage on a slick of its own effort. It hit a structural support for the giant inflatable mayonnaise jar. What happened next was slow, majestic, and horrifying. The inflatable jar, mortally wounded, began to hiss and deflate, slowly collapsing onto the stage, the press corps, and the entire string quartet. It was a slow-motion avalanche of vinyl and shattered dreams. People were screaming, but their screams were muffled by the suffocating embrace of a fake condiment. I stood at the back, watching the chaos unfold. The air was thick with the scent of garlic, fear, and expensive litigation. And in that moment, as I watched our CFO trying to claw his way out from under a section labeled "Made with Real Eggs," I saw Kevin. He was not panicked. He was not horrified. He was standing there, phony and looking at the devastation with a serene smile. He turned to Brenda and said, "Look at that engagement. This is going viral." And Brenda, buried up to her waist in deflated plastic, gave him a thumbs up. If you enjoyed this descent into madness, please share, like, and subscribe for more corporate nightmares.